The first question goes, could you briefly outline the route which led you from your work on madness in the classical age to the study of criminality and delinquency? When we talk about classical age, we are actually, it is a reference to the Enlightenment period, which was in late 17th to 18th century. So he was asked, Michel Foucault was asked to give a brief note on, or a brief trajectory, okay, on his earlier work that he has done regarding the history of madness, especially when he was dealing with criminal behavior, criminality of young people. He traced the history. So what was his result like? What did he find in his research work? So he was asked on that. This is the first question. Okay. The second question was like, so there is a certain discontinuity in your theoretical trajectory. So there was a gap. Okay, there was a gap in the explanation, the research work. And that was the discontinuity. It was not a complete explanation. Right? So he was asked, incidentally, what do you think today about this concept of discontinuity, on the basis of which you have been all too rapidly and readily labeled as a structural historian? So when a structuralist historian, rather, I would put up that. So structuralist historian, they are more concerned about the chronology, okay, how they frame history. Chronologically means they start right from the past, okay, the beginning, the genesis, which we call. So they start history, they start reading about a particular topic from the beginning of that particular idea, right? And there was some kind of gaps, not exactly loopholes, but discontinuity in the sense that there were certain fissures, okay, gaps in his research. And that may be intentional. And that is why he was asked a question that if you are into a very much structuralist pattern, if you're following a structuralist chronological pattern, then how come discontinuity is in your work? Okay, and how would you define the concept of discontinuity then? All right, because historians, they follow this path of continuity. But in Foucault, you will find the concept of discontinuity, whereas he claims to be earlier, before he became a post-structuralist, doyen or a figure, a personality. He was a structuralist, right? So he was asked of that concept of structuralist. How can he be discontinuous at the same time he is a structuralist also? How can he claim like that? So it is both two opposite things, right? So he was asked on that note. This is the second question. To put it very simply, the third question, Foucault was asked on the notion of discontinuity. Like, how would you talk about discontinuity? What is the concept of discontinuity by Foucault? And the concept of event. And event here is associated with putting different facts, okay, FACTS, facts together in history when you're writing a history. And it seems to be lacking, or there are some breaks in the pathways of writing history. Then how would you place it? How would you explain that situation? Because Foucault also had his own discontinuities, had his own breakpoints, right? So he was asked on the concept of discontinuity, what is discontinuity and what is event? What is the concept of event that Foucault wants to highlight upon? That is the third question. The concept of discursivity relates to two things. Just remember that, okay? One is digression. Number two is relating to discourse, which is debate. So two things are associated with discursivity, digression and debate. Okay. Now, as an example, I would like to take you back to our study of Lawrence Sterne, Tristram Shandy, where this discursivity was there. Remember, there was lots of digressions, and there was also debate related to his narrative voice, because he was defending about his own pain. Tristram Shandy was not telling about his pain. He talked it in a very mocking way, and he was more interested in Uncle Toby's life. He was more interested in telling others' lives rather than explaining about how he felt. Right? So, Tristram Shandy is an example of discursivity. But don't write it in your answer script. It is just to give you the concept of discursivity. Okay? Digression and debate. These two make discursivity. Foucault was asked about the problem of discursivity. Okay? It is a kind of a criticism, okay, where you challenge what you say. You are saying something, all right, and you're challenging your own claim. So there can be a chance of misinterpretation. Now, Foucault was posed a question because he raised the concept of power regarding discourse. Okay, so here, 3 things you have to keep in mind. 3 points or 3 words, keywords in the third question is about the use of power, the concept of power in terms of discourse, which has raised discursivity. Okay, and what is that now? Foucault has raised this question about power, that if discourse means what? A particular line, a particular method, a particular path where you are raising questions or interrogating that this fact is not true. Okay, you are questioning, and you are telling that Foucault was telling that every discourse is, or every history is written with some kind of power in it, with some kind of authority in it. Authority in the sense that, for example, if I give you the example of Mughals, so the historians who wrote about Mughals, they will never tell badly about the Mughals. Okay, they would always talk about Mughal as a power. So Foucault says that in history, any history book, when you read, you will find the concept of power hidden in it. And that is what is called discursivity. Okay, and so he was asked that from your research, how would you situate your position when you have also studied history, you have also researched about the history of madness, civilization, and criminality. You have also done research in that. So how do you say that? How do you pose this then? The concept of power, the concept of discursivity, the concept of discourse. Because in power, when you tend to bring power into your work or power into your history, you are also trying to give a shape to that history. Okay? You will use only those symbols, only those signs, SIGNS, and language which will give others the symbol of power. Okay, you will choose those words carefully which will symbolize power. All right, it is not hidden, but it has to be analyzed. And he was questioned. Foucault was questioned because he wrote history too. Alessandro and Pasquale asked Michel Foucault about Marxism, because slowly and gradually from his answer, the concept of Marxism was coming out. And Foucault was a diehard Marxist earlier. Okay, so he was asked Marxism based on the notion of phenomenology. Now, what is phenomenology? It is when you have a perception of a particular topic or a thing from your experience, and not by listening to others' experiences or not by listening to others' stories. You are experiencing yourself that. So Michel Foucault experienced Marxism himself. He got into that movement. So how was his experience? And first of all, what problems or objective obstacle he faced while he was in the movement, and how would he like to place that idea? This was the concept, because this was the question rather, that what was the basic problem that he found or faced when he was a Marxist, to put it very simply. Okay? Foucault was asked about his method of approach, his initial approach, when he found that there is a problem in the context of shaping a discourse, and you shape a discourse by using a certain kind of power, right? And when he was into Marxism, there also was a lot of power associated with the movement of Marxism. So how did he come to know about those problems? Through his different possibilities, different modalities. And how did he come to know about the concept of objects? Because there was the concept of subject and object, right? So how did Foucault analyze those? What was his initial and first approach? Okay, the birth of a particular challenge, how did it begin? So this was asked in the fifth question. Another notable thing is subject here is, for example, subject here is the history, and objects here is the people associated in that particular history. Okay, suppose Michel Foucault talked about madness and civilization with special reference to criminality, criminal behavior of young children, okay, teenagers, right from that particular period. So his subject was to study madness, right? So that is the subject. Objects are the people who framed that particular notion, or the people associated with that subject. Okay, they become the objects. All right. So object is very specified and subject is definitely a broad one. But here, just to keep a very simple note of it and to put it simply, subject, if the subject is history, object will be the people associated with the making of the history. So it depends upon you. It depends upon the person who is writing the history and from what angle or perspective the history is being written. Okay, that is questioned by Michel Foucault in terms of the concept of power.